Hello readers, I'm Amy and I'm your nonfiction feminist. Welcome to my first wrap-up video. This is for April 2019, obviously, since April was just yesterday at the time of this filming. I went through a lot of books this month, and by going through books, I mean I finished some, I didn't finish quite a few. Whenever April started, I was really kind of in the middle of a slump. I did work my way through that slump by finding some really amazing books this month, but there are a lot of books that I did not finish. They were all at the beginning of the month, so I will start there. In the first week or two of April, there were several books that I went through where I would read like a couple of pages and that was it. I gave up, I moved on. One of those was Evelyn Waugh's Vile Bodies. I do want to read this. I have no idea what it's about. I read like 12 pages and just gave up on it. Wasn't in the mood. The same thing happened with Grief is the Thing with Feathers. I started it, I read I think 5 pages whenever I got it from the library, wasn't feeling it, put it down. And this one's gonna hurt some of you. I started The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I think I read 15 or 20 pages of it, wasn't feeling it. This one, I felt like I got a little farther into story-wise, and I feel like it had a very abrupt beginning. You immediately dive in, you don't really know what's going on, you don't really have a sense of the storyline or the characters yet. Wasn't feeling it. I don't know that that's one that I'm going to try again in the future, but we'll see. We'll see how many frustrated people I get down in the comments telling me that I should try it again. Next up are 2 books that I still didn't finish, but I got about halfway through each of them when I finally gave up. One of those is The Fact of a Body by Alexandra Marzano-Lesnevich? This is a memoir. A lawyer is learning about an old case of this guy who I think raped a couple of kids, or mainly one kid raped and killed him, and she's kind of looking back in her past to the times when she was molested by a family member. It goes back and forth a lot. It was an interesting storyline. I mainly wasn't into the writing style. Alexandra is a lawyer, and I think that she writes like a lawyer, where somehow in the writing there's this kind of disconnect between the author and the story. I'd like to try it again. I might do an audiobook. I feel like that might be a better way to tell this story. We'll see. I'm not actually sure if my library has the audiobook at this moment, but I'll look into it. I want to try this again someday. Probably not this year, but someday. The second book I really struggled with in April and didn't finish was Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Bali Kaur Jaswal, I think is maybe how you say this. I was so excited for this book. I thought I would love it. A woman teaches a writing group. They start writing erotic stories. The widows in this book, like, just from their culture, it's very taboo to talk about sex. You don't really have that much great sex, I guess. But it's the kind of book that had an amazing premise that I thought I would be totally into. Like, this is the kind of thing that I love to read, is where you take sex and taboos and you insert it into a story. And I was just so disappointed. I can't even say what it was about this book, but I slogged through until I got to the halfway point, and I finally decided, as much as I wanted to read this and figure out how the story ended, I just had to stop. I felt like I was torturing myself, and I couldn't get through it. It could be down to the writing style, it could be down to the story. There's a lot of different stories going on in this. They didn't totally feel connected at that point. One of the characters is dealing with this personal problem that you don't know the details about. Another character is more of a contemporary romance style. The different characters didn't really feel like they fit together. The different stories didn't feel like they fit together. I'm frustrated and I'm disappointed because I really wanted to love this. I will probably try it again in the future, but I don't know. We'll have to see. This was so frustrating. So frustrating. That's all I have to say about this book right now. I am working on a reading challenge as well. This year it is the Devour Your TBR challenge. I'm working on it with a group on Goodreads. Every single month has a different challenge. January was January Jam Jar, where we put names of a bunch of books that we wanted to read into jars and picked them out, and that's how we chose our TBR for that month. February was Fantastic February. We focused on fantasy. That was a hard month for me. I think I started 3 fantasy books and I finished 1. April, which is the subject of our video, was ContemporApril. So the point was to focus on contemporary books. I have not actually found a very good definition of what exactly makes a contemporary book. So I ended up focusing more on my High Plains Book Awards collection that I got at the High Plains Awards dinner last year, and Stay was one of those that I read. It is a story told in poetry form. It seemed to have a contemporary story, so I'm counting it as a contemporary book. This is one of my High Plains Book Awards books. I only got around to 2 of them this month and I only finished this one. It's a little girl's perspective. Her parents are getting a divorce and she's very focused on this dog that she wants to get. She really wants a pet dog and the divorce is affecting that. I will talk more about this book when I do a video on the High Plains Book Awards. It was pretty good. It's not super memorable for me, but it was a cute story. It's juvenile fiction, so it's for a way younger audience than I would typically read for. But being told in poetry style makes it just feel more like it's for all ages, so that was nice. This Is All a Lie by Thomas Trofimuk is the other High Plains Book Awards book that I started this month. I did not finish it. I will hopefully have it finished by the end of May, depending on how far I get through Mental Health-a-thon. Next up, I have 2 rereads that I did at the very beginning of April. They kind of helped me out of that reading slump that I was talking about. And that is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck and The Crucible by Arthur Miller. These are 2 of my Penguin Modern Classics books that I just got. I think they're really beautiful covers. I read both of these in high school and I remembered loving them. Of Mice and Men is still awesome. I really love the mental health aspect of this. I work in a treatment center. I've spoken about this before. And this book has my heart. Like, it's so good. It's so heart-wrenching. I like that it's short. I don't know that it would work as well as a long book. But I really needed short books at the beginning of this month. Having the short books that I still thoroughly enjoyed really helped get me out of that slump. The Crucible I struggled with a little more. The first act was a bit of a slog. I was kind of bored. You're starting to get all the character development, and not just through the script, but he has a page or 2 just about the culture of the time of the Crucible, and the way it was written was not particularly interesting to me, but it did eventually pick up. I ended up really enjoying it. Again, a short, quick read. This is what I needed. So now on to the several books that I did actually finish, and for the most part, really enjoyed in April. The first one that I did, I actually did the audiobook for Pet Sematary. The audiobook is done by Michael C. Hall. He is the guy that plays Dexter, and I am so disappointed in him for not being in the movie. He did an amazing job reading the audiobook, and I'm like, why are you not in the movie? I want to see you in the movie. You'd be brilliant. I loved Pet Sematary. It was really well written. It was suspenseful. It wasn't too terrifying for me. Like, I've heard it's supposed to be one of his scariest books. It didn't get me like that. I'm just thinking it felt like more of an emotional journey on how to deal with death and seeing it as a problem rather than something that happens, for the most part, pretty naturally. The original movie gave me nightmares when I was a kid. I had watched part of it at a birthday party. Parents, don't let kids watch horror movies when they're little at birthday parties. It's not good for me. But I wanted to give the book a try now. I'm older, I think I can take horror a little better, and the new movie was looking intriguing, so I decided to read the book, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. This is a book that actually has a pretty good ending, considering how a lot of his books end. He's not the best writer of endings, but this one was solid. This month I also finally read my copy of Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I will link my review down in the description box below. I would put it up in the corner here, but I have no idea how to do that, actually. So if any of you know how to put it up in the corner, please tell me in the comments. Overall, I didn't love this book. I didn't totally hate it, but there were a lot of unanswered questions. And I recognize now a lot of my questions revolved around things that were really put in for symbolism, but I struggle with symbolism. I want you to just put the information out there. Just smack me in the face with it. Don't leave me guessing all of this stuff. Not into symbolism. I was not into this book. One book I really loved this month was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is another book that I listened to on audio. I got it on my Libby app from the library, and it was so good. It's a life story book. You're looking at the life of the Marsh girl from when she's little and she gets abandoned by her family to when she's older, and the perspective switches back and forth from her growing up in the marsh to a murder that happens when she's in her early to mid 20s. And of course they all think that the Marsh girl did it because the Marsh girl is an outcast. Everyone is very prejudiced against her. And something that I thought was pretty cool with this book, it didn't really go into more conversation about it, which I would have liked, but it kind of put it out there, is you have the Marsh girl who is white and she's a complete outcast. And one of her very close friends closer to town is a black man. And you look at how the black man is treated by a lot of the people around him, and you look at how the Marsh girl is treated, and you just kind of see the similarities there. You start to think, who's more hated here, the black people or the white trash people? I would have loved to see it go into more conversation on this topic. It's something that was touched on in some of my classes on race in college, but it's never a concept that seems to be thoroughly explored in literature, so it would have been cool if it went there. Another life story that I ended up reading this month is my favorite book this month. It's my favorite book since reading Perfume, as far as fiction goes, and that is The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. This was recommended by Lauren at Lauren in the Books. I will link her in the description down below. I'm going to do a separate review for The Heart's Invisible Furies. It is so hard to collect my thoughts on this. I was so in love with this book. It is heart-wrenching and gorgeous and just, it's basically the life story of a gay man. It goes into his love for his best friend. It talks about the AIDS epidemic. It discusses stereotypes about gay people. And this is all taking place in Ireland. And my idea of Ireland is that they've always been a little bit behind the US as far as discriminatory laws and things. And this is also taking place kind of mid to late 1900s for the most part. And it was just so good. And the reader for this did such a good job. And I'm in love. I cannot recommend this book enough. Again, I will be making a separate review for this so I can go into more detail on it, and hopefully not be at a total loss for words. Finally, we have the last book for this month, which I actually just finished yesterday, and that is Sleeping Giants. It's really shiny because it's my library copy. It's covered in the plastic. I enjoyed it well enough. I'm not in love with it, but my interest is piqued enough to go ahead and probably read book 2. It's written in interview form. Normally this is a form that I think I would be really, really interested in. I just didn't totally feel invested in the characters with the way it was written. It's a difficult writing style to kind of connect with, but I did enjoy it. You have this scientist who, as a little girl, fell into a hole that ended up being a robot hand, and whenever she grows up she becomes a physicist, and she is a lead person on the project of learning about the hand and trying to collect other pieces. It was interesting. It piqued my interest. There's not too much plot to this book. I think it'll get more into the plot in book 2. The one major complaint that I have is the timeline. There are no timestamps on any of the interviews. It's really hard to get a sense of how much time is passing. By the end of this, some of the interviews are talking about the last couple of years, but it didn't really feel like years, so timestamps, I think, are really important to a story like this, especially one that is so science-based. Timestamps are just something that would naturally be included. So passage of time was difficult with this, but like I said, I enjoyed it well enough. I will be continuing with the second one sometime in the next couple of months. That is it for my April wrap-up. Next month I am focusing on the mental health-a-thon, and Devour Your TBR challenge will be doing Moody May, which means that I read whatever I'm in the mood for, and right now I'm in the mood for the mental health-a-thon. So if you want to hear more about what I'm reading for that, go ahead and check the link down below in the description. As usual, please like, subscribe, and be my friend on social media, and I hope to see you all around.